Happy New Year
to you. The first event for 2016 with She Says, and thanks again to everyone at Pride Global, Reston Tobin, for being our gracious hosts in their amazing event space. I think we'll be using them quite often. So, welcome tonight for coming. Is it that's the first time to a She Says event? Okay, wow. Well, we'll forgive you. So, let me give you a bit of background of She Says. She Says was an organization founded in London in 2007 to help women within digital advertising sort of propel their career upwards. Mainly because the two co-founders were the only creative directors in London who were being invited to judge awards and speak on panels, and they just keep looking at each other, you know, we're best friends. There can't just be two female creative directors here. So they said, let's, get everyone together and really support each other. Let's invite people in to speak on things that we want to teach ourselves more about, and therefore position ourselves in a better place within the marketplace. We do joke about us calling ourselves She Says because we're really more she does. We don't really sit around and do nothing. So we have events like these. We have a mentorship program called Who's Your Mama? In 2011 is when we kicked off the whole courses thing, which Ollie headed up, working within agencies on digital production, strategy, and creative. And I head up from the mentorship program, taking it to the next level with career management. So my name is Amanda Jaskowitz. I'm one of the directors in New York, and as I said, I head up the career management side of things. What else can I say? We're really pleased to have new members join us every time. It's a great community to be a part of. We have events almost every month. We definitely have one in March. Hopefully we'll have one going on in February. So if you haven't signed up on our website, weareshesays.com, please do so. And you'll be kept up to speed with all the events that we have and then our newsletters that go out. So I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce you to Leo Russell, who is the CEO of Pride Global and Reston Tobin, to welcome you guys.
Thank you very much for coming. I think I'm uniquely qualified to address this group. First of all, because I represent the half of the species that leans so heavily on the other half of the species. Secondly, and dollar bet if I'm wrong on this one, I'm older than every other single person in this room.
Well, I don't know about
1960. So when my undocumented alien mother started to raise 4 children by herself in Rockford, Illinois, it was tough, really tough. So it's gotten easier now, but it remains very difficult. And we are proud to have built a firm both of men and women who are dedicated to opening up options, providing balance, giving you the opportunity to reap the fruit of your labor in the greatest economy humanity has ever seen. So we're proud to host you. Anything we can do to help you, my people are peppered throughout the audience, so please reach out to them and they'll reach out to you. And thank you again for coming. Appreciate it.
So tonight's topic is New Year, fresh start, because New Year's resolutions, everybody's thinking, okay, where I'm at with my career, do I need to find something new? How do I position myself into finding something new? We're asking ourselves that question all the time. And, let's turn to the experts, and we have 3 amazing women here tonight to be able to share with you some of their do's and don'ts and what you need to do to prep yourself in going after that next step in your career. So our 3 speakers tonight is Kelly Shea, who is the director here at Reston Tobin. We have Rachel Conlon, who is at LuxHub. Part of the Havas group. Yeah.
Not Hamas.
No, let's not go there.
Genuinely, we haven't called that before.
Is it Hamas? Okay. And then we've got Lauren Newton from Refinery 29, who's going to talk to us about all stuff LinkedIn related, and then some, I think. And then we'll open up the floor to Q&As. Both myself and Meg, over there, we'll be able to go around and point out people who are able to ask the Q&A questions when the time comes. So if we can keep it to the end, that would be great. And then we've got an hour left of networking. So anything that doesn't get answered then, and there's a speaker that you want to corner and talk to, do so then. Okay, so Kelly.
Yeah. So Good evening. I am Kelly Shea with Reston Tobin, and I'll be talking about building your resume. I will preface by saying that it is something that we do pretty commonly, whether it's your first time creating your resume or you're looking to rebrand yourself. In essence, you're providing a personal advertisement for a very difficult commodity, which is you. Looking at the perspective of your audience, you want to create your resume with the intent to elicit interest. So the average application for a corporate job gets anywhere between 200 and 250 resumes. So when you're putting yourself and your resume forward, you want to be in a position where you're standing out, you're making an impact. So with that in mind, the end goal is really to make an impact, to leave them continuing to pique interest and eventually get an interview. So we'll go over the components of what actually makes up a resume, as well as the do's and the don'ts. So these are the core components of a resume. So your contact information, your first and last name, as well as your address, email address, and I encourage everyone to make sure that your email address is up to date and professional. We've actually had an experience where someone submitted their resume and it was smoothlover689@gmail.com. Not the best when you're trying to apply for a job. And you can even include your LinkedIn profile here as well, as that is something as noted within the She Says event that is becoming more prominent and more popular. So the next piece is really the objective and the summary. So here, if you are going to include it, I listed it as optional. You want to make sure, again, that it stands out. Something that is very tailored to you, what you can offer as a candidate, but also think about it, again, in the perspective of the employer and the job. I think what often happens, and most consistently, is it's found within the employment history. People tend to either overshare or undershare information, and that sort of loses its dullness on the audience. Therefore, maybe it doesn't necessarily get you to the point of an interview. So when you're writing that objective, make sure that you're using buzzwords that are relevant to your industry, things that are really specific to you, and again, that actual job that you're applying to. So employment history, you want to make sure that you are putting your most recent work experience first. There is such a thing as a recency effect. People want to ensure that whatever you're doing and whatever they're looking for in an application, there is some consistency there. If you've done it 5 years ago, it may not be as relevant. As we all know, industries change, technology changes, so it's really important for those things to stand out. Education, similar to employment history, you want to ensure that it happens in your most highest form of education. So if you have a master's or PhD, those should be listed first, as well as a bachelor's degree. And within the education piece, and we'll talk about this in the do's and don'ts, you want to ensure that there's no misrepresentation. So if you're a recent college grad, it is important to put your GPA there. It is important to demonstrate that you did actually graduate with a degree. So if you're not sure exactly about this information, you need to find out and put it on there, because guessing could potentially put you in a compromising situation where it is misrepresentation. Skills and abilities, this is also really important. As we know, a lot of what's required, whether it's in really any industry, they want to ensure, a hiring manager or recruiter, that you have the core competencies that are necessary to do the job. And then if you are going to list a section within your resume for references, just put that they're available upon request. When we go into the don'ts of your resume, you want to avoid, again, oversharing information, which could include the personal details of your references. So the do's. Within the resume building and just within the recruiting industry, you really want to tailor your resume, again, to both the client and your experience. So it is completely acceptable to have multiple versions of your resume for each job that you're applying to, so long as the integrity holds true. you want to ensure that you're capturing the audience. And again, another statistic, which I myself am guilty of, the average hiring manager or recruiter spends approximately 6 seconds scanning the resume for the things that they are specifically looking for. So it's really important to take this into consideration when you're looking to apply or when you're putting yourself in a position where you want to stand out. Being clear about your skills and lead with the intent, which again in the objective session is also something that you can put in there. So ensuring that anything that you're including is action, it's concise, it's to the point, it leaves your reader wanting more. Reverse chronological order. So from a formatting and tactical perspective, you want to ensure that for all of your professional experience, you are including your employer, your title, the location, and the dates. A question that we often get asked from the agency side is, do I have to include all of my experience? Can I estimate when those dates were? It's really important to include as much accurate information as possible, and you want to ensure to include all of your job history, both relevant and non-relevant. So if there is a gap in your resume, it's okay, and you can work with a recruiter or even your peer group to ensure that there's reasoning and there's a good story and flow to the actual format on how that is presented. So the format should be consistent, it should be pleasing to the eye, the bullets should be aligned, and if you're putting commas and months to years, everything remains consistent throughout the entire format. And again, be a quick read. If the average manager or recruiter is spending 6 seconds scanning your resume, you want to ensure that that 6 seconds is actually making an impact. The don'ts. This is always the fun part. So rambling statements. You want to ensure that within the experience, or if you are going to include an objective, that it doesn't continue to go on. Resumes should not be autobiographies. You should try to limit it if possible to a page and a half of experience. Things that are personal to you, such as salary information, reasons for leaving a job, those are things that you can discuss both in the interview and should not be presented as the first impression of your personal advertisement. So photo or anything related to your agent status, I will say that this is something that's more specific to the US market. I know in some of the more global markets it is okay to put your photo, but for our purposes we will recommend to not do that. And again, lying and misrepresentation of information, making sure that if you're unsure to not include it and seek to get clarity on the facts first. So I know this was pretty generic about kind of what the do's and the don'ts are. We do have team members within Reston Tobin, myself included, that can sit with you, set up time to talk specifically about your experience and what your resume looks like. But if you're going to take anything, I think from resume building is that it should be tailored, it should be impactful, and it should be you, because you're your most precious commodity.
Hi everyone. Hello. I'm really happy to be here. So just a little bit about me. I work as a talent recruiter for Refinery 29, and I was asked to speak about maximizing your LinkedIn profile. And it's something that as a recruiter, not only at Refinery 29, but even in my previous life, I've really used a lot to find a lot of my talent. It's really been my bread and butter. And I do find that a lot of folks don't necessarily know how to maximize their presence on LinkedIn. So I'm going to look at my notes a little bit just so I don't miss anything, because I think it's all really important information. So forgive me a little bit if I stumble or anything like that. So the first thing that I want to cover is how do recruiters locate you on LinkedIn? And at Refinery 29, we sort of have a few different ways of how we do this. So the first way is networking with meaningful connections. We're really keen on networking with people that are going to add to our network in a positive way and people that really make sense. I do get a lot of connections that don't necessarily make sense for me, that aren't really in our wheelhouse, or aren't really going to be great networking points for me. So I think it's really important to be targeted when you're building your network on LinkedIn, because what happens is then you build your networks, you get to see their connections that are also within, you know, the field that you're targeting, and so on and so forth, and it lets you open up your network in that way. So what we do is I really, when somebody links in with me, I make it a habit to go to that person's profile. I look at all of their connections and who I might want to, you know, network further within their friends list, let's say. And again, we try to keep our connections targeted and meaningful to ensure we're reaching the right people and being seen by the right people. Another way that we find our candidates on LinkedIn is by targeting our direct competitors. So Refinery 29, we have a lot of different sort of points of business, and so there are no direct competitors that we go to all of the time, but we really target the hottest companies that are doing exactly what we want to do, and sort of do a search for BuzzFeed or for Elite Daily or companies like that, and really go through their roster and see, you know, who's been there a really long time, who just joined the company, and things like that, and sort of poach people that way to get the best talent. That's what we're looking for. We do a lot of advanced searches, so looking for years of experience, looking for other companies that you've worked with, and things like that. All things that you should be adding to your profile as well, because we do look for some specific information. And we also ask for referrals. A lot of times, you don't necessarily have to connect with the HR rep or the recruiter. You can connect with the senior director of whatever department you want to be a part of, and connect with them and make that connection. So I myself will reach out to senior level folks and say, hey, who have you worked with in the past? Who could you recommend to me? Who do you think would be great? And I think that I find that sometimes it might not be comfortable to do that, but people are really willing to help, and people are really willing to connect each other. So don't be afraid of reaching out and making those connections as well. The next thing I want to talk about is what should I put on my LinkedIn profile? And LinkedIn is sort of tricky because it is a social media platform, but it is not Facebook, it is not Instagram, it is not Twitter or anything like that. So often the presence that you have on these other social media outlets may not necessarily fly on LinkedIn, and you really do have to take a different approach, whether you're in the financial industry or whether you're in the creative industry. And I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that this is still a professional social media networking platform. So I think that LinkedIn can really be thought of as a reflection of your resume. I think that it shouldn't be as beefed up as your resume might be, but I think it should still be very, very reflective of it. As far as your experience goes, it just like your resume, it should be in chronological order. It should, list your most important achievements. It should list your most important duties and things like that. If you are a consultant or a freelancer and you've worked with a ton of different clients and things like that, I always suggest to have a header that says consulting or your own company's name or freelance work, and then sort of list the clients that you've worked with. Sometimes that saves a lot of space. I know that it was mentioned that a resume shouldn't really be too lengthy, because as recruiters, we don't take too much time to look through the entire resume. We look for what we want to see, and the same goes with your LinkedIn profile. So it shouldn't be, I shouldn't have to scroll and keep scrolling for your information. Make sure that all the information on your LinkedIn profile is still digestible and easy to read and sort of hits home right away, because we sort of view your LinkedIn profile the same way that we're viewing your resume. Let's see, and just for my preference is to either have the last 12 to 13 years worth of experience or your last 3 to 4 perm jobs. You know, I think that is a good amount of information because as it was mentioned before as well, we're looking for the most relevant experience. So something that you did 12, 13, 14 years ago might not be relevant really to what we're doing now. So it's really important to really dive deep into your most recent experience that's going to actually, you know, be relatable to the job that you're applying for. Let's see. As far as recommendations go, on LinkedIn I think there are recommendations and then there are endorsements. Folks seem to and tend to abuse endorsements because you can really endorse anybody. I want to say most of the endorsements that I have are people that I've never worked with, are people that have no idea. They're endorsing me for creative direction. No, you know, I don't do that. You know what I mean? So I stay away from endorsements because as a hiring person, they don't mean much to us because we know that I can just click through and endorse anybody that I want. But recommendations, I think, are sometimes overseen, but they're actually really, really important. And I've had a lot of hiring managers come to me and say, I saw this person on LinkedIn, they have awesome recommendations, let's bring that person in. So reach out to folks that you've worked with in the past and get those recommendations. You don't necessarily have to get those recommendations when you're leaving a job. I think it's perfectly fine to get those recommendations while you're in a job, just to, you know, show milestones in your career or milestones in your time working for a company. And they just sort of serve as a nice little tidbit of information for us when we're looking. You don't necessarily have to reach out to your references for that kind of stuff. We have it right there on LinkedIn. So they're very, very important. I will say that sometimes if you get an influx of recommendations at one time, hiring managers, it almost acts like a red flag sometimes, like, oh, they're getting a lot of recommendations, they might be leaving the company. But I think that we can, you know, I've seen that happen a lot, you know what I mean? But I think that if we all sort of get in the habit of just doing it regularly and getting people to leave feedback on your performance, I think it's a great thing and it's a great testament to you as a professional and how you work and things like that. So I think those are really important as well. The next thing I want to talk about is what kind of image should we have? And I think that this sort of question is twofold. So what kind of image should you literally have on your LinkedIn page? And what kind of image do you want people to take away from your experience and your personal branding and things like that? So the first one sort of goes back to talking about LinkedIn not being Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything else, and it being a professional site. And you know, having a not so professional image is just as bad as not having an image at all. And I just think that it's very important to, you know, have a professional image that shows who you are and how you want to be perceived within the community that you're networking with. Have a picture that shows your complete face. Have a picture that is friendly. Stay away from group photos. Stay away from pictures of animals. I've seen it. I have seen it. Stay away from pictures that are cartoon characters. I hate to say it, but of your baby. You know, things like that. It happens all the time. I think that it doesn't have to be, you know, a glamour shot or anything like that. But you know, something that represents you very, very well and represents you as a person and is you as a person. And it's really, really important. And again, this isn't Facebook, so don't, you know, have your red Solo cup in the picture with you or anything like that. Listen, I've seen it all, I promise. So that's really important. And the second part of that is what do you want your personal image to be? I think that personal brand is something that we're seeing as more and more important, especially in the digital media space, especially in the creative space and things like that. Personal branding is something that we really all need to just sort of accept as this is what we have to do now, and how do I want to represent myself as a professional. And so your entire LinkedIn is going to be very, very reflective. You know, my LinkedIn profile, I think, is pretty reflective of who I am as a person. I am fortunate enough to get to work for a pretty laid back, creative company, and I think that, the wording within my profile and everything like that is sort of reflective of that, while remaining completely professional. So just keep in mind that your LinkedIn profile is a first impression, so you want to really put your best foot forward, and you also never know who's looking at it. You know what I mean? I put time aside during my week to literally just scroll through LinkedIn and see who's out there. I might not be filling an open job. I might just be looking at who could add to my company, who looks great to add to my company. You know what I mean? So you never know who's looking at it. So just, keep it up to date and keep in mind that it is your personal brand. So what do we look for once we find your profile? Once we find your profile, the first thing that we do look at is your most recent experience. I want to know that in the past 2 to 3 years, you are doing what I need you to do in this next role that I'm looking to fill. I think that, I hate to say, if you did it 5 years ago, likely it's not going to be relevant to what we're doing right now. So we do look at your most recent experience. So make sure that it's up to date. I know that especially LinkedIn, it's something that I'm on every day, but it's not something that a lot of people are on every single day. So just try to make sure that you are, especially if you're job searching, you're updating it and keeping clean and things like that, because that's exactly what we look for. We look for somebody's profile that's up to date and relevant to what they're doing and relevant to what we're doing. After that, we will look at your work history. And see, the progression of your career. How long do you stay at one place? Are you freelancing a lot? All of those sort of things go into how we search for people and what we look for once we get to their profile. Nothing is good or bad. We just look at that to get a sense of what your career is like and how you might be, if you're added to our team. And after that, we will look at your recommendations. So I look at your connections and your recommendations. If you've worked with somebody, or somebody that I know or have worked with in the past, I might reach out to them and say, hey, what do you think of this person? Or I'll just look at your recommendations and see what your peers are saying about you, because I think that that's one of the most important things, is to know that you are well received by your staff and that you work well with your staff and they hold you in high regard. That's the type of person that I want to add to my team. What are things that we don't want to see? We don't want to see super, super long bios. We don't want to see super long explanations of your work history. I want digestible bits of information that I can go through really quickly and get a really good understanding of what you are doing and what you're good at and things like that. Let's see, we want to see, we don't want to see unnecessary information. So once you're at a senior level, you can, let some experience fall off. I don't need to see your internship experience or things like that. So be mindful of that sort of thing as well. Keep it to the point and keep it tailored to the roles that you're looking for. In addition, even if you're a junior level person, make sure that the internships are relevant. You don't need to put on really any of your other streams of income if you are working as a bartender or a waiter or a barista or anything like that. You don't need to have that on your LinkedIn profile, and I prefer not to see that. Those are good talking points once you're in an interview to fill in the gaps or say, after school I did this for so long, but they don't need to be on your LinkedIn profile. And just some other tips for you in using LinkedIn, because sometimes I know that it's really difficult, especially if you're just starting your LinkedIn profile. It was very difficult for me to make connections because it's not as user-friendly as other social media, because it is a professional site, it's a specialized site and things like that. So you can't just click add every single person. You have to be connected to them in some way. You can't just reach out with a message or things like that. So look for connections that are going to make sense for you, that are going to open up networks that you want to get into, that you want to learn about and things like that. Always make meaningful connections. Always send a note with your connection. It's standardized, I'd love to connect with you or something like that. But why? Why should I connect with you? Why should why does this make sense for me to add you to my network? And I also just think it's polite to send a note along with your connection. And once that request is accepted, send another note and just say, hey, thanks for connecting with me. It could be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be, hey, thanks for connecting with me. I applied for a job, this, that, and the other thing. It can be, that's fine. But definitely send a note, just, introducing yourself or things like that. I think that's always a really good touch. When you're asking to be introduced to people via LinkedIn, always send a note first to the first person and make sure that they actually know the person that you'd like to be introduced to. I have a ton of connections of people that I can't necessarily vouch for just because of networking, and people that I might not be the best person to make that introduction and stuff like that. So always send a note first before you ask somebody to be introduced to that other person and things like that. I always just like to make things a little bit more personal and not just like let's click through and build my network. So that's something that's really important as well. And my fourth point, I'm sort of like on the fence about it because there are some workarounds, but I think that if you're really heavy in your job search, consider getting the premium profile for a month or two or something like that. I think that it's worth the money, especially if you're very active in your job search, to do, because it does open up a lot of networks for you. It does allow you to send notes directly to people that you're not connected with. It allows you a lot more visibility. Those people that have premium accounts, when they apply to jobs on our job posting, premium accounts come up first with their experience, so we're seeing those people first, and those people are recommended to us if the experience is right. So sometimes I think that it's very worth it to pay the money. It's not that expensive. I guess it's a little bit relative, but consider doing that because it can really give you a lot more visibility if you're really, really active in your search. And lastly, keep things absolutely 100% professional on LinkedIn. Can't stress it enough. I think that you also have to be mindful of not only your photo, not only the experience you're sharing, but also what are you liking? What are you sharing? What kind of content are you posting yourself? I've seen a lot of slip-ups of people saying, oh, but you know what, I saw them post this on LinkedIn and I actually don't think that they'd be a fit. Or I saw them post this opinion and I was really taken back from it. I can't believe that they would say something like that. And I think that it's sometimes overlooked, and I think that LinkedIn, sometimes it's forgotten that it is a professional site. But keep that stuff in mind. Anything that you do like, anything that you do share, anything that you do, comment on, it's populated, whether you know it or not. You know what I mean? If we're connected and you comment on something, I'm going to see that you posted that comment and everything. So keep that in mind as well. And I think that's it. I hope I covered everything. If you have any questions, we're going to take them at the end. So thanks for listening to me, guys.
So hi everyone, I'm Rachel Conlon. As Amanda mentioned, I run Havas LuxHub. We're a business and brand strategy group that sits in the North American office of Havas that specializes in luxury, fashion and lifestyle brands. As I mentioned, we're part of Havas, which is one of the largest communication companies, but it's actually also a company that I've been with for over 7 years. So I think Amanda and Ali originally asked me, while I'm not going to claim I'm an expert in negotiation, I've definitely had a lot of experience having to do it for a number of reasons. One, I spent most of my career working in new business and marketing. Anyone who's ever touched a pitch in an advertising agency knows that negotiation is a key part of that. Secondly, I work for a French company. Anyone who works with French or for French, I apologize, Malka, also understands that. And thirdly, I decided to marry an attorney, which means that negotiation is definitely a large part of my daily life. So just to kick off, I wanted to get a show of hands on how many people in this room would be sick to the stomach if they discovered that they had thrown away $5,000. Well, what I'm going to say is A lot of us may be doing that by not tackling negotiation in the workplace. Negotiation is a part of everyday life. It's not something that we're genetically born with, unless you're very lucky. It's not something that you can learn overnight. It's a process. It comes with experience. Probably the reason why our parents were always so much better at it when we were younger. But on that point, I'm going to talk to you today just about some simple tactics that can help you when you're negotiating your salary and your overall job package, whether that be in your existing company or whether it be if you're a job seeker elsewhere. So let's kind of start with some of the numbers. We form part of the majority. 80% of us do not like negotiation. It's not something that comes natural to us. It's not something that we're comfortable with. What's even more upsetting is that women are 2.5 times more likely not to tackle negotiation. You know, we could debate for hours about the reasons behind this, but I really want to focus on the individual. And finally, we're not willing to negotiate, even though we know that 8 out of 10 companies actually want to negotiate with us. It's something that they like seeing in new employees and existing employees, because it means that you care. So at the risk of sounding like Tony Robbins, there's one thing I wanted to start with. While we all work for bosses, we all have CEOs, you are the single most important CEO you're ever going to work for. You're the only person that has the power to actually change what are your life choices, what is your professional path. So it's just something that I want you to bear in mind as we're going through this presentation. This is not rocket science. This is something, these are basic tactics. And a lot of you will be like, oh, I know how to do that. They're things that we forget. And I see it as I'm interviewing potential employees, and I see my colleagues and friends, be guilty of not paying attention. The first and most important point, and I'm not asking you to act out what is a L'Oreal ad for a potential employee or employer, but this is something that comes up a lot. If you don't know what your value is, how is a potential employer meant to know that? You really need to understand that. Like someone was asking before we kicked off about imposter syndrome. That's something that I think every single person in this room has suffered from at some stage. What warrants me standing up here talking to you about negotiation? You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to understand what your value is and really start believing it versus asking other people to believe it. Know the context and understand what you're getting yourself in for. If you're going to work in a startup, look at the glass doors, look at what's available online about what type of salaries they're paying. Understand what you're getting yourself in for. If you're going to work for a big network in a global role, understand what else you can negotiate as part of your package. So this is something that I feel really, really, really strong about. You don't flirt with your future. Don't encourage a guessing game with a potential employer. You need to be direct, clear, and concise about what you expect, whether that be on an existing team or when you're looking at a potential new opportunity. If you aren't, how are they meant to know? They don't understand. They can't read minds, most people. Don't take the first offer. And this is another thing that I feel very strongly about. Everyone loves a little bit of a battle. It's something that's good. Negotiation is important. Also, really look at what is the package holistically. Unfortunately, what is salary negotiation has become synonymous with what is package negotiation. If you go to a lot of companies, there's a lot of added benefits that you may not get at another company. These could be extra holiday, they could be things like maternity leave, which all become important parts of your decision making. So just make sure that you're not just chasing the dollars or just chasing what could be a very short-term solution. Think in the long term. Think about where you want to go. Is this company going to invest in me? Invest in what is a new talent. Now, this is something that is my personal pet peeve. If you are responding to an offer, you've received the package letter, you're kind of looking through everything. Don't respond on just one point to the recruiter or to your future boss or your existing boss. Look at it holistically and feedback on every point, whether that be positive or negative feedback. Make sure that you're very, very clear with what is your desire. Life is a game of timing. And there's two ways you could look at this. Whether you be someone who's looking externally from your existing company and exploring what's out there, and you're interviewing at the 4 hottest startups, make sure that the timing is such that the offers arrive in at the same time. We actually had someone in Havas say to us, oh, I'll get back to you on that offer letter you sent because I'm just waiting on someone else to send me an offer. Like for me, I'm going to immediately consider you starting on the back foot because you should want to work at this company more than anyone. Also for existing, I think what's very important for existing employees, know what your fiscal year is. Know when the budgets are closed and when the budgets are planned. Know when to ask for that pay rise or for that promotion. If your budget's closed in December, don't go in January to your boss and ask for that 10% pay rise when they're not going to be able to do something. It's going to be a much bigger battle. Now, this is something that majority of us are looking in the room. I see a couple of men. Women have good intuition, you know, and a gut is something that tends to be able to digest what your head can't. So if you have a bad feeling, it may be the best possible monetary package that you're getting, but if you have a negative or bad feeling about it, speak to people, but genuinely, it's up to you to make the decision. You can get as much advice, but if you have a bad feeling, it will probably end up being something that you're not comfortable with once you get in the door. So negotiation is a process. It's a transaction between two people where both people are trying to get to the best possible point. We have got to remove the emotion from it. It's something that you just need to look at very, very, very simply as something that has to happen as part of the process. So just remove that emotion. Don't let it affect you if you decide to take the job or if you don't decide to take the job. Just try and look at it as a transaction that has to happen. And most importantly, don't ride off into the sunset when you get into a company. You're sitting at your table, you're happy, that's not the end of it. Negotiation needs to be something that you continue to do within the company. You need to be constantly the best advocate for yourself. You need to be looking at how you can be proving to your leadership that you can genuinely be the person that should be getting that next promotion. And this is something that I think all of us in the room, need to pay more attention to. The hunt is not just in the job, it needs to continue. And just to finish up and going back to the first point I made, if you don't know your value and your worth, how is your employer meant to know that? So make sure, whatever that requires, whatever that means, make sure that you're working on what is that belief system that I need to embrace. Perfect. So I think we're going to do the Conlon.
Do you guys want to sit in the silver chairs or in the white chairs? What do you want?
I quite like the silver ones.
All right.
As a cool.
So we can open up the floor to any questions that we have for our panel. Anything that you guys have, I'm going to grab this half of the room and Amanda will grab that half. If we don't get to all of your questions, we're more than happy. Like we said, we can speak at the networking. You guys are welcome to stay as long as you want and talk to our panel and talk to any of the recruiters that are on the floor as well. So we can open it right up.
Okay, so one comment and then a question for Rachel. For startup jobs, if you're looking to look at industry salaries, check out AngelList. The URL is angel.co. AngelList has every startup company basically in the world and a lot of the industry averages in different locations are there. And Rachel, for enterprise companies, agencies, global agencies, what are the non-standard things that you think are negotiable in terms of perks and the package?
So to build on what you're saying first, I also think anyone who's looking at startups should look at Crunchbase.
Yeah.
I think that's, if you don't know about it, it's an excellent way to understand what is the funding for a potential startup, who are the key leadership. It's just a really good resource to go to, and they do a free daily newsletter. In terms of, I think that depends on the individual, and it depends on the level that you're hiring at. For me, holiday is always something that's negotiable. Also education. I'm a big proponent for investing, and I'm not talking about 1 day or 2 week courses. I'm talking about significant master's and part-time master's degrees that Havas, I know, have been very good at investing in employees like that. So that's the biggest thing that I think is negotiable. Also, honestly, maternity leave. I know it's a standard, but unfortunately, as we know, in North America is not good. In New York and the advertising agency world tends to be even worse. So I think that that's something also to address, especially if you're at a particular time in your life.
Anybody else have any questions on this side? Good.
In applying online, you often, I'm sure other people have this feel like we're just throwing resumes into a black hole, because you never hear back a lot of times. And I know that they talk about keywords and using keywords and placement and those things. Are there any rules or hints where the keywords are used or whether that actually is true?
I think that can be true. I think that it sort of differs from company to company. I know a lot of really, really large companies, they have systems that are automated to come through and look at, keywords and things like that. Startups and smaller companies don't necessarily do that. There's a real person, I'm one of them, looking at all the hundreds of resumes and things like that. So what I always suggest is always tailoring your resume and your cover letter to the job description that you're applying to, and look at the wording that they are using within the job description, and don't plagiarize it, but reflect that in your resume. I know it can be a hassle, especially if you're heavily job searching, to go in every single time and tailor your resume and things like that, but it could really pay off. I'm looking for what I have in my job description. I want to be able to see that on your resume because, again, we look at things really, really quickly, so we want to know that we have a match. So I would go in and tailor certain keywords that the job description has and put those into the meat of your resume.
I would also say, working with recruiting agencies, many times we do have direct relationships with our clients and we have existing credibility, so you can ensure that your resume isn't really going into the black hole. You have a liaison and an advocate on your behalf. We don't always guarantee that we get feedback, but at least you have a partner, and even if you're working with multiple recruiters, it's just a more personalized approach.
I'll piggyback on that and say I've worked both agency side and now I'm in-house. And when I do work with agencies, I am much more likely, even just giving that person an interview right off the bat instead of screening them. I work with agencies that I know and I trust and I value, and a lot of times they'll send me resumes and I'll say, hey, cool, I trust you, let's bring them in. So working with staffing agencies is something I didn't know about at all as a junior professional, and I can't tell you how valuable they can really be to your job search.
Yeah, of course.
Following up on that for Lauren and Kelly, even if we tailor our resume and a cover letter to different positions, how do you feel when you see someone applying for different positions within the company? How do you feel about that? Is that a no-no?
It's not necessarily a no-no. I think that if your experience is relevant for different positions, then I think that's okay. But I will say that sometimes, especially if they're more like mid-level positions and the positions are very different from each other, that's not the best approach, mainly because it could really, and I'll be candid, it could come off as the candidate just wanting a shoe-in and just wanting a foot in the door at the company no matter what they're doing. And the company that I work for right now, we really want people that really want the job and not just the name of the company on their resume next. So sometimes I will see people that have applied to every single job in every single department that you could ever imagine, and it doesn't make sense to me because then I'm not clear on what you actually want to do and where you want your career to go. And again, it sort of makes me feel like you just want to work at the company. You're not necessarily looking to contribute to that specific role.
I think from mid-level onwards, you should know what your value proposition is. And if you do want to make a lateral move into another function, then be clear about that, and upfront about it. Mm-hmm. But I do think you need to be clear on what your skill set is to the point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, on the agency side especially, agreeing really with their points, I think personality, fit within the specific team can also come into play. So if everything is in line from the actual experience, your value proposition and what you can bring to the table, but it's a matter of the team or the actual cultural and succinctness, I think that is something that, again, in working with agencies, we might have a better grasp by having that experience with knowing our clients.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I was wondering, do you have any tips on when you're working with a recruiter or a staffing agency, how to get the most out of the relationship and what questions you should be asking them and just how you work that relationship?
Tons. It all depends on your individual situation. I think, candidly, unfortunately, agencies may not always have the best reputation and what our value proposition is. Prior to working at Reston Tobin, I was within financial services. I did sit in the seat of the client, so I understand and am very aware of what that looks like. I think us as a business, we try very hard to be different, and the clients that we work with and the proposition that we offer, we're really tailored in providing a best-in-class experience to the candidate and what their needs are, just as much as we are to our clients. It really is a partnership. So for you specifically, we can definitely talk offline in terms of what your needs are, who we work with, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, but our tagline is bespoke, tailored service.
I think being honest, sorry, just to continue on that, being honest with what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know exactly what it is, that's okay.
Right.
You can use, like, that's what they're there for. They're there as a consultant for you, and they're there as an advisor to help you find that out. So listen to the advice that they're giving you based on what your input is.
I think there's a question in the back.
I wanted to know, if you're someone that gets, I am someone that gets a lot of requests for connections on LinkedIn, but from people who seem to like not really be related or not really sure what they want, how do you decide who to accept and then what to do afterwards?
I'm in the same position for sure, and what I do first is and as I mentioned, I look for people that are working within the same wheelhouse as me and that I know could open up my network to, people that are, in the same vein. Some people I know right away that they're linking in with me because they saw a specific job that is posted on our website or things like that. And I'll typically accept those ones first because that's a connection that I can use right away. And that's how I sort of weed people out. There are some people that I don't make sense whatsoever for me to link in with, and so I'll just either delete the request or I won't respond to it. I'm honest. But I think that it's really important to just make meaningful connections. And a lot of times I will link in with first the folks that send me a message along because they're telling me why they want to link in with me. And so, I'm like, okay, I know why, let's continue this conversation or things like that. That's sort of my approach. I accept the people that I know I can work with pretty immediately first, and then go back to people that might be able to grow my network, or it might just be sort of like a passive connection, and then go from there.
You can also cleanse. I have a friend who's a big advocate of cleansing their social channels.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, if you aren't engaging with these people or you're not getting anything out of your digital relationships, you can easily cut them out of your life and they never know. Most of them, unless they check.
I have a question. So for the first, I'm usually a permanent worker, but the first time ever I'm getting offers for contract work, and that is terrifying. But so in regards to negotiation, that's pretty different because there is no package. It's just like an hourly rate or whatever term. So how would you say, and it is through a recruiter, so you have some secrets you can share, but how would you say you would negotiate something like that, an hourly rate, where there's really nothing else but that rate to talk about?
Yeah, I think it goes into managing expectations up front. You're right, there is less flexibility sometimes when looking at a contract. There are factors to take into consideration when making that decision. It's the length of the contract, the actual project that you're going to be working on, and even taking into consideration what the actual hourly or weekly or daily rate is. Factoring in that it's not offering benefits and that you're only getting compensated for hours worked, and based on your value proposition and experience, commanding what you're looking for up front. I will say that it makes our jobs challenging when those conversations happen on the back end, not only from the candidate side, but if we're not doing our job appropriately and asking the right questions to make sure our expectations are aligned. So having that early and not being afraid to be clear with that expectation.
Early, so it's like, so I'm talking to a recruiter right now, so you're saying it's better to have this conversation now as opposed to when the offer is made?
Absolutely. No surprises. When we get to the offer, we should both be really excited and ready to get started. I think that's a huge value proposition with partnering with the recruiter is you can be very candid up front with what you're looking for. Yes, you might be seeking a full-time position, but in the interim, you could consider contract if these needs are met. And we'll tell you what's realistic with the market. So early, absolutely.
Aside from your recruitment specialist, you should also speak to your professional community and that network and understand like what are the parameters within which you can negotiate. And I think you can look at what is a short-term contract as well as a longer-term tenure where there are potentially some other benefits that come into play. So just understanding what is that individual opportunity and how you can play that. And also the hours. I've seen some freelancers lose out because they didn't realize there was a limit to the amount of hours they could be paid for. So it might be a day is equivalent to 8 hours. So like and when you have, especially in the new business context where you have people working, you know, burning the midnight oil, like that's something to be very aware of. And I also, if you know, in the digital space specifically, you know, you are a coveted item at the moment. Like everyone needs their skills, and agencies can't keep up with the projects they have coming in. So know that you are, you know, you're a commodity, but you're a valuable commodity to them. So, yeah.
I personally made that sort of transition going into a job, and actually that was the first time that I ever had to really negotiate. And it was terrifying, but I think that it can be also really rewarding. I'm happy to connect with you further about telling you my process because I did sort of go through a lot of things, going from a perm job to a contracted role and stuff. And what the lady said were all great points, but let's connect afterwards and I can sort of tell you my process.
What percentage of the jobs that you're recruiting for are now contract as opposed to permanent?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the industry. So we have two divisions. We have a division that is focused on full-time permanent hiring, and then I'm actually focused within the contract space. So if you ask me personally, I'm 100% focused on those jobs. But it depends on the market too. So one of my specialty verticals is I actually recruit for recruiters, and that is the hottest contract market I've ever seen. If you are a coveted recruiter in your space, especially if you have technical skill, you are joining into the best-in-class companies like a Facebook and Uber, a Pinterest, on a contract basis with the expectation that it will go full-time or long-term. So it really depends on the market, it depends on the actual field that you're in and the kind of company that you're applying for, but in some cases it could be the fee for entry.
So you're basically, to try to understand this better, you're saying that a company like Facebook, Google, they want their own internal recruiters by contract.
Yes, so we're placing recruiters in a contract capacity. They're an employer of Reston Tobin, and they're working on software engineers or artificial intelligence, and then they'll look to bring them on eventually full-time, but I think it depends on what the company is looking to achieve in their long-term
What target they have to fulfill.
Yeah, their products, their forecast, but it's an enormous amount of opportunity, and there's huge leverage from a negotiation standpoint as well on what those rates will be paying, on what other perks might be available.
Yeah, you think they just want to get those people in and pay them a salary.
Yes and no. It sort of depends. A lot of times companies will have their own internal recruiters, but their recs will be so high that they need the extra hands, and they need people that are coming in and ready to go and don't need that much training. And so they'll bring people in on a contract basis, and it works out well for both parties.
I don't have line of sight in the exact figures, but I would estimate about 5% of our full-time hires in the New York office were from freelance contracts. So also, like, increasingly we're going the way of the technology companies and using that 3-month trial as a basis. You know what, it's good for both sides. It's good for the employee and it's good for the employer. You see if there is a good chemistry and if you want to, like, if you are going to be the right people to go on the journey together.
No benefits though. No benefits.
True, yeah, no, that is true, so.
Yeah.
We've got time for one more question.
I had one question for each one of you, but we'll catch up later. So I'm going to ask the most important one, I think, for maybe for a lot of people here. So recently I noticed that I get connections and messages from recruiters and HR people, and I get the sense that when I'm found by them, I'm a little bit more valued in a way. So I wanted to ask you guys, what percentage of the time, Kelly and Lauren specifically, do you guys find yourself going out and finding people on your own terms versus people reaching out to you? And I know, Lauren, you mentioned some of the ways that you use the advanced search tool to find people. So how can we increase our visibility to get more requests from recruiters and HR people?
Yeah. For us, and at Refinery 29, I think that we mainly go out and handpick candidates when it's a really tough role to fill, or it's a more senior level position, like mid-level or senior level, because we are looking for folks with very, very specific experience. And so I can understand the way that you feel. Like if a recruiter reaches out to you, they see something that would work for either the client that they're working with or the position that they're working on. So that is what I usually try to hand pick my more mid to senior level folks. Junior level and entry level roles, I think that we attract a lot of talent, and we attract a lot of good talent, and so the people that are coming into us, we can find a really good hire within the people that are coming to us. But when you get to like a senior level role, you're usually looking for folks that are already in a really great position that is at a direct competitor or things like that, and so that's when I'll reach out to folks.
And to increase the visibility, what are some of the things you can do? What do you do? How do you search?
Yeah, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. Make sure that 6 months into your role, you're going in and you're updating that profile because you might have started doing certain tasks, and then months down the line you might be doing other tasks that are really, really important to to the experience that you're having there and the skill set that you're learning. When I started at Refinery, I have built my skill set so much that it's sort of a completely different job. And a lot of jobs can be like that. You might start off doing one job and you end up doing something completely different. And so it's really important to keep your profile up to date. And also always add in your relevant past experience. Because when I'm looking for somebody with 3 to 5 years of experience or 7 to 10 years of experience, the way that LinkedIn pulls that information is by going back and really seeing what you have filled in. So if you only put your last 2 jobs and those last 2 jobs only take you back 4 years, but I'm looking for somebody with 7 years, and technically you have 7 years, but you just didn't put it on your profile, you're not going to come up in my search. So just make sure that your LinkedIn profile is very, very accurate with pertinent information.
Yeah, for me personally, I think the harder and more specific the job is, the more likely we are going to target a passive seeker. So if you're getting reached out to by recruiters, that is an excellent sign. I think a real indicator in terms of the value that they could potentially offer is how tailored is the message to you. So we talked about tailoring your resume to how it appears to the audience. You should expect from recruiters the same level of detail, that they took their time to do their due diligence in looking at your profile, what skills you have to offer, what experience you have. That's been the highest success rate in understanding what our clients need and what they're looking for, and just how much time you yourself have put on the LinkedIn profile to summarize who you are. I also personally like when people include a little bit of a synopsis about them, whether, and of course it should always remain professional, but just adjectives that describe them, that they're an impact team player, or just something that they gave it a little bit of thought and it has authenticity. I think that makes me really gravitate towards them because they understand the value of that kind of network.
If that's it for questions, we're going to have our networking. I just wanted to thank everybody on behalf of Reston Tobin and Pride Global for joining us and our speakers. Plenty of beer, plenty of wine, so you'll join us. And if Amanda had any words, but we really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, everyone.